Hi, everybody. Um, so last night, I think I mentioned that I'm 41. I was born in 1977. I was almost a 78 baby. Um, so I pretty much remember all of the 80s. I mean, like 1980, 1981 might be a little bit fuzzy here and there, but for the most part, I'm an 80s kid. Now, I don't know exactly how the city kids had it, okay? I'm not necessarily a country kid either. Uh, I live in a suburb. Um, and I don't even think it'd really be called a suburb, but it's not a village and it's not a city. Like where I live, when I was a kid, there was like in the city I live in, there was two places you could buy food. That was a little place up the road from my house. Like it was like a little corner store, or no, I should say three, because there was two places down the road from me. Um, and then there was a gas station, which was a lot further than walking distance, like 3 miles away. Now we have one place in my little suburb, and I ain't buying anything from there. Oh, hell no. They got rats bigger than my cat Precious in that place, and it smells like dog. But anyway, I didn't grow up in the city, and I didn't grow up in the country. Like, people around here didn't have chickens or cows or horses or anything like that. Although I never had to go very far to find those things. So tonight I just wanted to talk about like what I did as a kid compared to what my son does as a kid. Okay, so Gavin is 7 and he spends, I would say, 85% of his day on his phone, computer, and simultaneously watching YouTube on his TV. Like he'll be watching two YouTube videos at once, like YouTube on his phone and YouTube on the TV. And the boy, the only reason he ever goes outside to play is if this other little kid here is here. Because that little boy likes to play outside. And Gavin does like to go swimming. Um, but otherwise, he's not real keen on being outside. Now, when I was his age, right around there, um, you either were outside or you were reading, because like TV. Um, and I think that we had cable when I was a kid. I can't quite recall, but there was like nothing to watch on TV. Like I remember during the week, like during school time, there weren't cartoons on. Like PBS, like I think that you got Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers in the morning, and that was it. After that, it was just straight out boring shit on PBS. Of course, not that I would have got to watch it because my mom would start her soaps. So, and I didn't get a TV in my room until MTV uh, started broadcasting. When MTV started broadcasting, that's when I got a TV in my room because I wanted MTV, because MTV was something I could watch all day long. And then Nickelodeon come along. But up until that point, there was nothing to watch on TV after breakfast. Even on a Saturday, like I think by noon, cartoons were over on Saturday. Um, so, and we had like VCRs and stuff, but typically you would have just like at that point in time, like the early and mid 80s, VCRs were expensive. So you would, a typical household would just have one if they had one. I don't know if mine was typical or if we were maybe above some, but for having one. But everybody I knew had a VCR, and nobody had one like in their room. Um, so if mom was watching TV, there was no way I was going to watch movies in there. No. Or if the dad was home, he didn't want to watch what I wanted to watch unless we were watching stuff like Troll and Phantasm and the Garbage Pail Kids came out in 1980s, in the 80s. was awesome. I remember I wanted a Cabbage Patch doll when I was a little kid, and because Cabbage Patch dolls were like a big fucking deal. Never got one, but I wanted one so bad. Um, so when the Garbage Pail Kids came out, I was a little bit older to the point where I didn't really want a doll anymore, and I just thought those were just so cool because they were just so gross. Um, and as a kid, I had an Atari, um, and I had an Atari even when Nintendo came out, but uh, I had a friend that had the Nintendo. But at the time, I don't think it was until like the later 80s that they started having, like handheld gaming systems. So you had to be inside. And, in my mind, it was like, okay, well, I've got all night to be inside. you know, I'm going to go outside while it's nice. Because like I said, there wasn't a lot of entertainment to be had inside of a house. And since I didn't live like in a city like New York City or anything like that, there wasn't like a bunch of fun to be had on the streets. No, it was just, I'm going to climb trees. I'm going to make mud pies and dig in the dirt and load up my dump truck, take Barbie outside, let her play in the pool, because I had lots of toys and stuff. And even with I would always take my toys outside. And if I had a pool, you can bet your ass my Barbies were going in that pool, or my doll, whatever I was playing with, which I wasn't picky. I mean, I was a bit of a tomboy, so I had Tonka trucks and Hot Wheels and all kinds of stuff that I would rig up things outside. Um, and that's what you did all day long. And if you're lucky, you had like a radio out there, because I could do that. Um, but and the 80's music was freaking awesome. I mean, it's just I I loved the 80's, and I love music of all decades and stuff. But I think that the 80's was probably my favorite because, it's just so happy. uh, but there wasn't a lot to do, I mean, and when I was a kid, before I was 10 years old, the phone didn't hold any real power over me either. I was like, it's the phone. I don't have anybody to call. All my friends are here. They're around. And I couldn't see my friends every day because my mom would say, no, you'll wear out your welcome. You can't go to their house. So I had to divide my time, and it didn't even matter if there was kids to play with. I was outside running around the neighborhood, which when I say running around the neighborhood, we're talking about maybe 10 houses. Um, 10 houses in the whole little bit of neighborhood that I was allowed to explore when I was little. Um, so my mom would find me over at Miss Anderson's house. Miss Anderson was like a grandma type, or she'd find me across the street hanging out with my friend Bob, who was a drinker and a smoker, and he was old enough to be my great grandpa, and he'd always have these women over. And when I was a kid, I had no clue what he meant. I mean, he would. This man had a pair of lesbian friends, and I didn't know what a lesbian was. I knew they were both women, uh, even though one had a man's name and she talked like a man and dressed like a man. I knew they were both women, and I guess I knew they were a couple too. I don't know what I really thought about all that. I don't remember asking my mom about it. It was just something that, as a 4 or 5 year old, I just accepted and didn't think anything of. But he would call them. He'd say, Ann, the woolly boogers are coming. And I knew who that was. That was this couple, and it wasn't until I got older I was like, oh my God, he called them the woolly boogers because of that. you know, and I would call them that too. When I would say to my mom, the woolly boogers are across the street, I didn't think anything of it. And I was talking to one of the ladies, had a daughter that I ended up getting cool with as we got older. She was quite a bit older than me, so I looked up to her. And I had told her one day, I said, "You know what Bob calls your mom and dad?" She said, "No, what does he call them?" And I said, "The woolly boogers." And she just laughed, I mean, because I don't think he had a problem with it, because most of his female friends were lesbians. I didn't know what that was at the time, but I knew who was couples, and I don't recall questioning what it was about. But when I was a kid, I had a bicycle. And I mean, my brother, oh my God, my brother, he was all over the neighborhood on his bicycle. But of course, he was 7 years older than me. Now, once MTV come along, I know that we had cable before MTV came up. And that was like, and I was getting older at the time. And that put me in the house a lot. And then Nickelodeon came onto the scene, and that kept me in the house a lot because I love Nickelodeon. They had this show called You Can't Do That on Television, and when they would say, like, if I remember correctly, because it's been ages since I've seen it, but I think, like, if they said the wrong word, they'd have slime dumped on their head, and it was always so cool. And, like, Alanis Morissette was on there, so when she come up with her music career, and I heard the name Alanis, I was like, wait, that's the name of one of the kids on You Can't Do That on Television. And sure enough, it was. And I was like, I remember her. And I remember being a kid, and like they had Kids Incorporated, which was this little show that had like singing kids. And Fergie was on there from Black Eyed Peas. That was her one of her things that she did as a kid. That was around the same time as the Mickey Mouse Club and all that, which I think Disney might have come up before Nickelodeon. I don't really recall when Disney started doing it, but you had to have like premium cable to get the Disney Channel. But there was no Cartoon Network, no Boomerang, no nothing when I was real little. So I don't think Nickelodeon come along until like 85. Might have been 84. I'd have to look that up. I know I was probably getting close to being 10 or so. And also around that same time period in my head, Fox started up with the Tracy Ullman show and The Simpsons and all that kind of crap. So there was a lot going on in the 80s that was just like super cool. Um, and my kids, they'll get so bored, like if the electricity's out. And when I was 7, if the electricity was out, it did not affect me any during the day unless I was stuck in the house. And even if I was stuck in the house, I don't really recall getting upset about the electricity being out. I don't remember ever noticing that it was out when it was out. Like even during the winter and stuff, like if it was snowing, it didn't, I didn't notice if it was hot, cold, rainy. I used to be out, if it was raining, the only reason I was inside the house is if my mama made me come inside. I was out there in the tree in a lightning storm if she didn't make me come in. I was having fun. I was like a little monkey out there. Um, and definitely making mud pies or jumping in the mud. I loved rolling around in mud like a pig. Now I look like a pig. So, but it was so much fun back then. And the thing is like the kids today don't realize how much freaking fun that was, because they're so entertained. And I mean, we did that to them. Um, my generation did it to them, and like the bit of a generation before, like the generation between my parents and myself, like all these 90s kids that were born, being thrown in front of a TV, because once Nickelodeon and Disney Channel came along, and I can't remember what else, but I know Nickelodeon was one of the big ones. Once those came along, parents started just sitting their kid right in front of the TV, or once they started buying videos, just like, okay, here's the Barney video, just sit in front of the TV and watch it all day. We're like so totally ruining these kids, because when I was a kid, you didn't have to have electricity to have fun. You didn't even have to have friends to have fun. You could have your whole like day planned out. You could be doing experiments. You could be out catching frogs. There was like tons of stuff to do, and I'm sure that there's 80s kids that grew up in the city that have about the same type of. They didn't notice blackouts or stuff because they were always outside riding their bikes and running around and visiting this person and that person. And I know, like, my husband, who's a 70s kid, would talk about running around the streets of Indianapolis from the moment he woke up until it was dark. That's their parents wouldn't let them back in once they left, except maybe for lunch. They'd throw out some sandwiches and stuff. They didn't need the stuff that kids now do, because now, all you got to do to know how completely spoiled these kids are and how bad we've got it is let the electricity go out. In my house, like, it doesn't matter if it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning. If the electricity goes out, you can hear just about everybody in the house go, fuck. Because we're sitting there thinking, okay, the fan's off. And then there's the kids just bugging the shit out of you because they don't know. We've gotten so used to isolating ourselves to where it's like, okay, what do we do? We're supposed to talk to each other, and then it's like, but I don't want to talk to you. I want to do my own thing. I want the electricity on. I want to go to sleep with the temperature at 72 and the fan on and maybe the TV on. And then Gavin's like, I want to watch YouTube. I want to watch YouTube. I want to watch YouTube. Because I don't always give him his mobile data. I have to put that on his phone. Most of the time I just want him using his Wi-Fi. Oh. And like I said, when I was a kid, I don't remember blackouts and stuff. I don't, because it just didn't really affect the course of my day. I wasn't missing anything. And even as I got a bit older, like when I was 13 or so, I had a Walkman and I had tapes. Oh, let me tell you. Before things went to MP3s, because CDs really didn't have a long lifespan, I had about 700 or 800 tapes. I had like 5 boxes of this shit. I had tapes like out the wazoo. So like I said, as long as I had batteries when I was like 13 or 14, I was cool. And I knew people on all parts of the neighborhood, and a landline would actually work when the power wasn't on. So I was like, hey, you home? All right, I'm going to come see you because I'm bored as shit. Walk over there with my Walkman. And now it's just like, everybody's like, I need to charge my phone. It's going to run out if the electricity doesn't come on soon, because nobody's charged up. And if they got a laptop, you're looking at maybe 2 hours or so before it's down. And then, of course, there's no internet. Being an 80s kid was awesome. We didn't have all the cool shit that the kids have right now is really cool shit. Don't get me wrong, it's fucking awesome. I would have ran with that. Can you imagine how smart the kids today would be if we would have had the shit back then that we got right now? Holy cow, we'd be 20 years ahead. But I am glad that I got to experience digging for worms and stuff. My son looks at that stuff and he doesn't want to touch it. He's just like, oh, okay, I see that bug. I know what those bugs are. I used to play with roly-polies and ants, and hell, when I was 5, I would eat the ants. I remember what they tasted like. And kids just don't. Kids today, just very few of them realize, it's all about, I need to be entertained. Entertain me, Mom. And when I was a kid, it was just, hey, get in here and get something to eat. Or running in, and grabbing something to eat, you know. But that is something I feel strongly about. So if you've got a kid, all of you that aren't watching me, if you've got a kid, take them outside, show them some nature. Do your best to get them to touch like worms and roly-polies, or pill bugs as some people call them, which they're actually called woodlice, sorry. But those things were so much fun when I was a kid. Make them go out to the park and, like, instead of playing on the jungle gym and stuff, like, walk around and, like, really look at stuff, you know, and make them touch those things that are safe, because they don't need to be scared to touch a worm like Gavin is. Gavin's afraid to touch a worm. God forbid. He's gonna be such a macho man. Have a good night.